Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the CRA Board. We're in for a special treat today by Mr. Joe Minicozy. Before I get into the bio and the introduction, I think I want to bring to your attention a recent Sun Sentinel article published February 16th, and the title is Broward Bets on Federal Money to Reduce Pedestrian Deaths. The reason why I bring this up is it does tie into what we're doing here. And it hits it right on the head, and Pompano Beach is all over this article. So the article, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just excerpts from it. The first line is really, you're more likely to be killed crossing the street in Broward County than almost anywhere in America. The grant is a $5 million federal grant. It's matched by the county at $1.25 million for a total of $6.25 million. This is all overseen by the Broward MPO and used to study how to improve road safety. So it says in here, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Pompano Beach has the 14th highest rate of pedestrian traffic fatalities out of 101 metro areas. Many streets in South Florida are not walkable. Gaps in basic walkability measures like crosswalks, crossing signals, can make a stroll through a neighborhood a gamble. A recent survey conducted by a Broward Advisory Board found that transit safety was one of the top priorities among hundreds of respondents, even more than congestion in some locations. Among respondents, very few felt safe commuting, especially cyclists and pedestrians. The reason why I bring this up is because this is really what you all have been planning for many years. It's all about building a downtown, all about walkability, creating a viable, sustainable downtown. Not a lot of cities get to do this and have an opportunity to build a downtown from scratch. We do. It's very exciting, but you only have one shot to do it correctly. Here before you is Joe Minicozy. He's an urban planner, imagining new ways to create about visualize land use, urban design, and economics. Joe founded Urban 3 to explain the visual dynamics of the market created by tax and land use policies. Urban 3's work establishes new conversations across multiple professional sectors, policymakers, and the public to creatively address the challenges of urbanization. Urban 3's extensive studies range geographically over 30 states, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Joe holds a Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Miami and a Master's from the Urban Design and Harvard University. In 2017, Joe was recognized as one of the top 100 most influential urbanists of all time. So this is the first series of many that we're going to hold as an educational piece, as a way to build a stronger downtown. So you'll see some more coming up later, workshops, and also some more public engagement opportunities. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Minicozy.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I also used to work with Claudia about 20 years ago in West Palm Beach. I was the zoning administrator for the downtown master plan there, so there's some history here. When I talk about cities, let me see if I get the clicker working here. I'll share a lot of information. For those of you in the audience, I'm a very visual presenter, so everything's going to be on the screen. There'll also be a PDF of this whole thing when we're done. What I want you to do is put yourself in the mindset of cities have a DNA. They have a growth pattern the same way that I have a DNA, so this is how I started when I had hair. And this is my trajectory, right? So I'm going to be my grandfather whether I like it or not. We all know this, right? As you get older, you see your habits of your grandparents coming at you, or more importantly, this guy, again when I had hair, that's my dad. I'm Italian. I can't change that. That's genetically in me. I'm 100% Italian. I'll wave my hands around when I talk. But also my family suffers from a predisposition of heart disease, particularly the men in my family. So I know that I have to eat right, I have to exercise, I have to lower my stress level. I have to do all of those things because there's a cost that I'm going to incur if I don't. So I don't want to have a 7 bypass heart surgery. Don't want to do it. So I have to do things differently now. So when you think about Pompano, have in your mind, what city are we going to become? What is our path? What is our trajectory? What did we do right or what did we do wrong? What's baked in our DNA of how we grow? So my grandparents actually had a condo in Fort Lauderdale by the sea. I've been coming down here since the 80s. I've seen the growth of Broward and what you all have done, and a lot of it isn't great. And you're dealing with those repercussions of it now. So it's the choices that your great-grandparents made in your growth pattern that you're dealing with today. And it's going to be complicated. So where I live now is Asheville, North Carolina. Who's been to Asheville? Wow, okay, thank you. Thanks for coming and eating at our restaurants. This is what Asheville used to look like in the 1980s. This is the 1990s. That's a 96 Chevy Celebrity right there. So the town was essentially fallow and boarded up. We had this attitude that we weren't urban, we were rural mountain people. And it wasn't a successful plan going forward with what happened to our community. Long story short, we were the highest debt per capita of the entire United States by the time the Depression hit. And we essentially mothballed our city. I worked for this guy's company. This is Julian Price. He started a company called Public Interest Projects. And it's a for-profit real estate development company. Think of it as a mini CRA, but for-profit. So 75% of our money, we would fix buildings, 25% we would seed businesses. So business affordability is a critical component to growing your city up. So what we were doing, though, was constantly talking with our community about what's our role in this, but what's everybody's role in this. So if you look up the word incorporate in the Oxford American Dictionary, it says to constitute a company, a city, or other organizations as a legal corporation. So by law, your city is a business. It's incorporated. Your county is incorporated, your state is incorporated, and so is our country. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert Show. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. And I'm such a nerd, I actually looked it up. The federal law is on the bottom of that slide right there, that we are listed as a federal corporation. It's not that we're a capitalist corporation, we're essentially a social corporation. We've all got to work together. So taking business principles into your city and understanding that you've got to balance things out. If there's a need for affordable businesses or affordable housing, that's got to be solved somehow. The market isn't going to solve it itself. So my city at $14 billion of taxable value is 7 times the value of Ted Turner. Is Ted Turner going to make all of his decisions by looking at Facebook? Of course not. So we should expect our city, by the way, y'all are worth $17 billion. So you're the board of directors of a $17 billion corporation. And your city is essentially a finite boundary of land that has to be managed. It's those acres that are what you are. It's that farm that we have. So if you look at the farm and say when you talk to farmers are always talking about economic terms with the crop yield per acre, the water per acre, all of that. And we talk about the buildings per acre. This is one of the buildings that we rehabbed. So ground floor is retail, second floor is office, the upper stories are residential. The city started by enhancing the pedestrian realm. So once you make the pedestrian realm work in an urban environment, you're going to make the habitat for pedestrians work, right? So if it weren't for the city doing that, we wouldn't have rehabbed the building. We actually got accused of being subsidized, that the city did that, and there were some people who are just like, you didn't pay for that sidewalk. We're like, all right, thank you, city, for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches in a street tree. We took the building from $300,000 of value to $11 million of value. So what the community gets is 3,500% more taxes off that building. Let that wash over you for a second. Do you have a 401k plan that grows by 3,500%? This isn't our money that we're going to get back. Go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. You know, how do we build communities' wealth? How do we build value in our community that can be used as a shared corporation? And again, people with biases are like, Joe, that's cute and everything. That's $11 million. We've got this Walmart at $20 million. Okay, fair enough. That Walmart's double our value. But it took 34 acres of our farm to make that happen versus our 0.2 acres. So that's an apples and oranges understanding of value, right? Sometimes we get hung up on the big number without understanding the potency. So rather than total value, here's the taxes per acre. We're producing 100 times more taxes per acre, double the retail sales. Who would have thought that a furniture store, a beauty salon, and a tattoo shop are double the taxes of a Walmart? It is. Obviously more residents per acre and a lot more jobs. So when you make things apples to apples, you start to get a different view of your city. We start to understand the productivity of how we should be measuring and the metrics we should be using. I want you to realize this isn't complex math that I'm doing here. It's like 5th grade division. No, we're just taking the value and the productivity and dividing it into the acre. All lots are different sizes. So let me use a different analogy. When we talk about cars, we don't talk about cars on a miles per tank basis, do we? If we did, we'd all be driving Ford F-150s. Could you imagine if I was like, hey, my truck gets 650 miles per tank? You'd immediately know that's stupid. So rather than per tank, or we'll say per gallon, right? Because that normalizes the efficiency of the vehicle. So rather than miles per tank, here's miles per gallon. The numbers just changed, and we should all be driving BMW Acetas at 70 miles per gallon. It's a very dangerous little car, by the way. It's cute, but making a joke here about efficiency. If we normalize this with a $3 commodity, we should be doing this for our acres. So when you look at the productivity, this is taking probably about 40 different cities and combining them together. For every dollar, let's see if I can get the cursor to work here. For every dollar of county taxes in single family, somebody in the unincorporated county pays to the county in property taxes per acre. Their brother or sister in the city's paying about 5 times that. Here's the Walmart, that's the mall. This is a 2-story building on Main Street right there. 3-story building and a 6-story building. So when you get into mixed uses, you start to see this potency. Also, when you stack stories, you're stacking your dollar bills. This could be in Driggs, Idaho, Durham, North Carolina, or downtown Dallas. Once you start stacking your stories, you're stacking your potency. So, by the way, some people are like, Joe, you just hate Walmart, you keep on bashing Walmart. I presented at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers as a assessor in here. Anybody ever hang out with assessors? Anybody want to imagine what it's like to be with 3,000 assessors at a conference? It was like the squarest conference I've ever been to, but this guy gets up and presented at 8:30 in the morning on how cheap Walmarts are. Let that wash over you for a second. I'm in the back of the room thinking, this is brilliant. 3,000 assessors. He's getting all of his property taxes lowered in one meeting. That's efficient. Now, I'm also trained as an architect. I'm having a coronary. I'm like, how is he getting away with this? Why aren't the assessors upset that he's just walking in the room and broadcasting, I'm going to pay the lowest taxes in your community, and they were cool with it? Assessors are agnostic. If you make a cheap building, it is what it is. They don't put more value on it, right? So I went up to the microphone and I asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? He goes, 15 years, 20 years. We designed the building to depreciate it as fast as possible. We'll build another building, depreciate it down again. We don't care. We're trying to pay as little taxes as possible. It's your corporation. Is that the commitment you want to have in your corporation? Do you want a 15-year relationship with the property? That's about the life cycle of a cat, by the way. I'm a dog guy. We allow this stuff to happen to us because we don't ask the questions about the policies. Don't hate the player, hate the game, but understand the game. Understand how your tax system works. So I would argue that people don't see it because we aren't presented the information in a way that we could digest it. I'll give you a different way of looking at technology. This is looking at my brain. I've got my creative thought process in green versus my brainstem activity in blue. If I can show you the inside of your head, can I show you your economic productivity of your community? So this is my county in total value. I've got Mount Mitchell Federal Park up here in gray. Gray means non-taxable. This is Mount Pisgah down here. The Blue Ridge Parkway comes through town. Green is low value, so you see the low value up here in big IV. And then purple is high value. That big purple splotch right there, that's the Biltmore Estate. That's America's largest house. That one property is worth $100 million. Pretty cool to have a house worth $100 million, right? When the Cecils show up at one of our council meetings, we all genuflect and thank them for their time. But it's really not a fair way of looking at it because they have a 180,000 square foot house on 8,000 acres. They have the biggest gas tank, right? So rather than total value, here's value per acre. And I'll just show it to you in 3D. Anybody want to guess where downtown Asheville might possibly be? It's that big purple mountain. Now in my county, I've got 2 voters out in the county for every 1 voter in the city. My friends and family that live out in the county got my state legislator to call us a cesspool of sin, which was super awesome. Welcome to Appalachia. And I showed this map because we want people in the county to realize what we're producing in county taxes. We're all county taxpayers here, right? So if we're all paying the same millage rate in county taxes, where's the county getting all of its money? The downtown. Incidentally, if you look to the east of Asheville, there's this little town right here. It's called Black Mountain. 2-story buildings in their downtown. You can see its little mountain popping up there. So make this stuff visual so you can see it and understand and this is what we'll be showing you your community in a second. So to start with, y'all, this is a fairly nerdy chart, but every state operates differently from their cash flow. Florida's right about here. The majority, the red stuff is property tax, green is sales tax, blue is going to be transfers. In Ohio's case, Ohio charges a local income tax. It's kind of an anomaly, but basically Florida is mostly a property tax state. When you move to the right, when you get to the far right of the chart, you get to Alabama and Arkansas. They're operating mostly off retail taxes, which is a really bad way to run a government. Because when a recession hits, people don't buy a TV or a boat or something like that, so all of a sudden you can't afford the city. So it's good that you have property tax base. Now, coming from North Carolina and understanding the Florida tax system, this is the way that our tax system works. So we have assessed value equals our taxable value, pretty much. And then, unless you have a military exemption or something like that, the only thing that we can do is mess with our tax rate to get our tax bill. For Florida, you all have exemptions to get to your tax value, and then you can play with your millage rate. But I'll show you how your exemptions work. Basically, if you had a $100,000 value of commercial and residential, right out the door, if you own your house, you get $50,000 off your taxable value of your house with your homestead exemption. Incidentally, that doesn't work if you're a renter. So let that wash over you from an equity standpoint. Your renters are going to be paying higher taxes than somebody that's a homestead. You can get you get $25,000 is floated for the school district of value that you can't change. So to look at your millage rate, you're paying about 5 mills to the city, 6 mills to your school, and 11 mills to your county. Just looking at that on the surface, if you're paying 5 to these folks up here, but 11 to the county, you're paying 2 times the level to Broward County than you're paying to your board of directors that sits in front of you. So do you get 2 times the service from Broward County? You're getting the sheriff's department, but what else? So just have that in mind where your money goes. It's not just your city commission. Talk to your county commissioners as well. But your tax bill is going to be around $2,000 off that $100,000 for commercial and $1,000 for a resident. So your commercial is going to be where you're producing more of your tax revenue because of the Save Our Homes Amendment. Now the craziest thing about your Save Our Homes Amendment is your cap that you put on it. So commercial can grow at 10% before it stops. Residential is capped at 3% or CPI, which is ever lower of the two, which is super awesome if you own a house. But think through the economic ramifications of that for a second. So your commercial property is going to be growing 3 times faster than residential, and this is just a cap that voters in Florida voted on. When I was living in Florida, this happened. So this is a chart from Brevard County, Florida. This is an awesome chart. So you see the run up to the recession. Market is in blue, and assessed value is in red. When that gap happens, you can feel real good if you're living in your house. You're like, I'm not paying full market value, and you all know this. It's like, that's kind of cool, right? Now the reality of what you have to pay for, however, was when the market drops and comes back up, the prices can only climb up at 3% or CPI, which is ever lower of the two. What's going on with the price of gas, the price of a police car, the price of a chair? Is it following the blue line or the red line? It's going to follow the blue line. So the hard part for y'all when you're balancing your budget is you've got sort of handcuffs on because you can't harvest the money because you've got this cap on it. In 2021, your CPI was 1.4%. I just pulled this chart from Florida DOT. At that same time, you were averaging a 3% growth in asphalt price, and you were at 1.4 of value of growth. So if you pave a road, you're immediately in the hole by almost a factor of 2. Incidentally, just for the hell of it, I pulled the Federal Reserve's index price on asphalt from last year to for 21 to 2022. In just 1 year, the price of asphalt went up 30%. So realize the challenge of what your commission has to deal with on paying for stuff with these restrictions put over them. So just be honest about this, is that it's hard to, when you pay for a road, it's going to be expensive. When you do a sidewalk, it's going to be expensive. That money has to come from somewhere. So to you all, There's the basics of what your CRA is. It's established by your city government to reduce blight, improve economic health. I'm going to go through these different chapters and encouraging public investment going forward. Again, I'm going to go through a lot of data. This is all going to be a PDF file. You can look at it. But Broward County is pulling about 32% of its money from property tax. Pompano, you're pulling about 38%. And by comparison, your cousin down the road there at Fort Lauderdale is at 24%, and Hollywood's 39%. So you are getting a large amount of money from your property taxes. So your zoning and how you grow your property is going to have a return in your revenue. For the maps, this is Broward County in total value, and you see the big purple splotches along the highways going from total value to value per acre. You see the shift toward the ocean, and here it is. You'd kind of expect this, that the oceanfront value is where you're going to get a lot of productivity. It flattens out really quick when you get it west of 95. And then zooming in a little bit, you can see your cousins of Fort Lauderdale and Hollywood. Incidentally, the Fort Lauderdale stuff that's most potent is not at the waterfront. You can see their downtown is further in, and it's like a big purple mountain right there. And you all know that when you drive through it, but you can see the productivity. I would bear in mind to not only look at the purple stuff, but the lower purple and the red stuff. That's the stuff that's an easier lift and it's smaller buildings. It doesn't have to be all skyscrapers. This is Pompano Beach by itself, total value. Again, you see all the large parcels west of 95, value per acre, and in 3D. So this is basically how you're cash flowing and how it flattens out, particularly in the industrial districts where there's a lot of jobs, but it's not a lot of value because the buildings are sort of cheap. Taxable, non-taxable, we went ahead and ran this. You're an anomaly because you have a growth barrier. But this is the way that Broward County is. When you drop the growth barrier out of the Everglades, you're at about 27% non-taxable. There's no perfect number of that. We just want you to know the numbers because it was easy for us to pull this. This is the land that you control in public for the public benefit. So parks, schools, churches, things like that. In your city, you're about 21% non-taxable. Again, pretty standard for what we see, although you have a very large airport in the middle of it, consuming a lot of real estate. In your CRAs, you're looking at 28% in the Northwest and about 10% in the East for your taxable, non-taxable. And from a productivity standpoint, the footprint of Pompano is about 6% of the footprint of the county, and y'all as Broward County taxpayers are producing about 7% of the county's property tax base. So that's a 1-to-1 ratio of productivity of your footprint to your punch in the pocketbook from a productivity standpoint as Broward County residents. In your city, this is what your area of downtown, of your CRAs is. About 18% of footprint is about 13% of value. That's not good to be less than a 1-to-1. Did y'all follow me? This is giving you like a basic body mass index of where your economics should be. So you have some work, and you all know this, that you have work to do in this area. When you look at your Northwest CRA, it's 17% of land area, 9% of value, which is less than a 1 to a half. Again, that's very low. But in defense of the Northwest CRA, it's an incredibly large area that takes in neighborhoods and other areas beyond just a downtown. When you look at the East CRA, it's about a 1-to-3 ratio. For a good downtown, you typically want to have a 1-to-6 ratio of potency, and we'll see that with your cousins in Hollywood. But let's not forget what you're producing, what the downtowns and the CRA are producing for the county. It's a little bit less than a 1-to-1 right now in value. This is your East CRA by itself is 1-to-4 to the county. That's the better producer, obviously because it's closer to the ocean. The way that Florida development is, we just kind of did a series of like onion skins or layers. This is the layer that's from the ocean toward the I think US 1. That layer is worth about $3.9 million of value per acre on average in the county. When you go the next layer in from the US 1, the FEC tracks, it cuts down to about 2.2 million on average. And then when you go from the FEC tracks to 95, it cuts in half to 1 million. And then 95 to the Turnpike drops all the way down to about 800,000, sorry, 900,000. And then all the way to the edge goes down to about 800,000. So we saw this in Palm Beach County. We see this in Miami. It's what we know about Florida development. The coast is where you have the potency. But the question is, why are we not able to get potency going westward, which can actually happen? So you have a lot of Walmarts here. Your average Walmart is pulling about 800,000. I'll use this as a control subject as we go through the next building typologies, but this is your basics of a big box. Your Walmart on Atlantic is a little under that at $600,000. So on the bottom of the slide in the lower left is the Walmart down here on Atlantic at 600,000. This is your single family, and you're averaging double that at 1.5 million per acre. When you get into, there's a terminology that we call missing middle, is this stuff that used to be traditional townhouses and mixed-use stuff like that. You have a couple examples of that. Again, single-family product, but either duplexes or townhouses. These are pulling 1.6, 9 million an acre. And remember, single-family detached is 1.5 million an acre. On the left is about 11 million an acre, and then the Koi residents, which are back here about a half a mile, are about 14 million an acre of potency. But that typology of development is about, let's call it 5 times the potency of single-family detached from a productivity standpoint. And it's real simple. It's just taking up less land per unit. So the more you spread out, the more you liquidate your value, basically. When you get into multifamily, 3 million to 6 million here, 15 million on the bottom. Again, the bigger buildings are going to be crushing it, 24 million, 46 million on the bottom, 38 on the top. But multifamily is averaging about 12 million an acre of potency. So it is actually producing that kind of high level of production. And then into the commercial types, again, we're going to go backward now. Home Depot is down to about 900,000. And it's because it has huge surface parking lots. So you're essentially paying for that parking field when they go in. It's low value, so they're going to be paying very little taxes in it. This is the Publix at about 1.3 million, or a little under single-family residential. The Pompano City Center is about 1.8. And we went ahead and grabbed Sawgrass just for the heck of it. It's about 3.7 million. It's got a lot more buildings in it. It's a bigger building. I don't know if y'all know this, but it was actually designed to look like an alligator. I don't really see how that does, but that's what the architect said. Your CRA buildings, to show you some examples, on the left, it's 6 million an acre for the beach house. La Veranda is pulling 11 million an acre, and the Foundry is about 9 million an acre. This is a little strip that's got some mixed use in it, but it's sort of still a strip mall, but it's pulling 8 million, 7 million, 5 million, and 4 million of value per acre. And then the bigger buildings are going to be doing very productive at 14 million, 16 million, 32 million. And then these ones are crushing it at 47, 76, and 70. Now again, I want to step away from these for a second. It's easy to say, yes, Joe, that what a no-brainer, a big building by the beach is going to be productive. Got it. Okay, done. Let's just move past that. Let's look at these things that you probably drive by every single day. On the left is 5.7 million, and on the right is 9 million. These two here are 8 and 9 million an acre of productivity. So these are actually really good, and it's just 2 stories. So it's about 7 times the potency of single-family housing in those little guys. So mixed use on average is pulling about 12.5 million an acre. And going down to your cousins of Hollywood, you're getting 40 to 58 million. These smaller buildings are, was that 83 to 183 million in potency. Fort Lauderdale is just obscene. On the right is 246 million an acre in Las Olas. But that shows you the potency you can get out of a downtown that's not on the ocean. But again, this may be your grandfather or grandmother. It's further into the future. So just to put some of those samples on the map so you can see them. Again, you can see evidently in the model where they are. What was kind of surprising to us is this little purple spike that's showing up right in here in the middle of the county. is this building, coming in at $23 million an acre. So that's an indication that you can actually do something further westward to create a foothill, if you will, in your county or in your community. Your industrial stuff, you've got a lot of real estate and industrial. This is all of it colored in, 32 million square feet, 80 million square feet by parcel, and it's pulling a total taxable value of about $3 billion. What that all works out to is a land area of about that big. Basically your airport, if you squeezed everything together, is a footprint. And it is what it is. These things aren't all that potent because they're just really big, cheap boxes with parking. But it's pulling about 1.5 million. Now the trade-off is these are your jobs too. So this is where you get your work, but in that type of building, you're basically buying down a value. The thing to be mindful of is not letting other types of offices and office space go into that space. Use that space and that typology of building for the buildings that have a need for forklifts and stuff like that. But for an architect's office, that should be in more of a traditional building than one of those. So when you look at those buildings, here they all are, in the area. And again, they are what they are. If they're actually manufacturing something, awesome. But again, you want to keep your office uses more into an office type building rather than a warehouse. So for your CRA stuff, you're established in 1988. You have standards that you've been following along the way. These are some of the values of the buildings inside your districts. This is the Wild Ales at original value of, its current value is 2.5 million. In 2013, it was 1.3 million, so it has grown value. This is the City Vista apartments at a current value of 2.5 million an acre. As 2013 was $263,000 per acre, so that's a huge jump up. And then out at the Pompano Beach Fishing Village, it started at a value of its current value is 6.5 million. It started at 1.6 million. So there has been some growth in your values as far as a return. Your Northwest District started at 1988 value of 200, and let's call it a 300 million of value. It's now at about 1 billion of value. Your East District has gone from 136 million to 355. Again, that's a total value. When you do it on a per acre change, it's a much more dramatic change on the east in potency than on the west. But again, it's a bigger district in the west. So your total change has been 350% change in the west and a 260 change in the east. On a per acre standpoint, it's about a 500% change in northwest and a 400. So you're growing. You know this. You're seeing it all around you. From a city comparison, I'll just fly through these. You'll have these. We pulled Davie. Davie's pulling about 700,000 an acre citywide. Pembroke Pines is about 900, a little under a million citywide. Coral Springs is about 1.2 million. Deerfield Beach is about 1.2 million. Hollywood's pulling about 1.4 million, and y'all are about 1.4 million. So you're about even with Hollywood in potency. You're also about even from a population standpoint. Fort Lauderdale is crushing it at 2.6 million, but you can see it in their model how much of their city is red or purple. It's really, really potent. From a growth standpoint, this is Pompano Beach's growth over time. These are your cousins of Hollywood and Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale's in orange, Hollywood's in green. You've been tracking very similar. They kind of peaked faster than you all, but you're catching up. We have these models of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Hollywood and Pompano. Oops, got out of control there. I'm going to go ahead and drop. I'm not even going to bother going through all this stuff, but you'll have this in the PDF. Let's focus on it because Miami and Fort Lauderdale are just different animals than what you are with their scale. But when you look at Hollywood, you're about 73% of their population, about 80% of their area. Your density is pretty close. You're about the same density at 90% of their density. Their top of their model, their peak value per acre, you're only 40% of what they are. So that shows you an opportunity what you can grow into somewhere in your community. And your total value, you're pretty close. You're about 80% of where they are. They're a $20 billion community. You're $17 billion from a standpoint of your portfolio wealth. Before I go further into the projections and some other analysis, I just want to go through a weird thing and the reason why I was at the assessors conference. This is a map of, we can go into the computer and turn off all of your buildings and just look at your dirt value per acre. This is Cheyenne, Wyoming, and if you look up here in the northwest of that map, you see how that one neighborhood is all the same color pink, pretty much. That shows that everybody's got the same price per square foot of their dirt. When I was presenting at 8 in the morning in their community, I asked about this property right there, which is the dirt under the mall, and that's pulling about $15,000 an acre. And I asked the community, I said, how is it when you cross a street in the same zoning category, the land doubles in value? Can y'all tell me that? Why does the land double the value when you cross a street in the same zoning category? And everybody was kind of silent, and the tax assessor was sitting in the front row, and she raised her hand, and she goes, you don't understand. And I was like, tell me, what am I missing? She goes, well, the more land you have, the lower the value. The mayor actually started laughing. He almost spat coffee out of his nose. I was like, really? I get more of your land and you give me a discount? She goes, yeah, that's the way our assessment system works. There's less people that can afford large tracts of land, so we've got to give it a discount. I said, does that work that way for diamonds? There's less people that can afford a big diamond, are they cheaper? And she goes, well, no, that's just the way our standard is. I'm like, where'd this standard come from? There's 3 miles of streets around that mall. There's only 200 feet of street in front of the property across the street. She goes, we don't count the value of the infrastructure as part of the valuation of the property. So this is how the systems work. We need to understand all the systems and the biases in each of the systems. There's heavy biases inside the assessor system, and this is one of them. But at the brass tacks of what you have to pay for the road in front of the property. It should all work out, right? So by the way, I went to the assessors conference to ask them. Their magazine is called Fair and Equitable. So I said, how is this fair and how is it equitable? To their credit, they're like, it's not. I'm like, where did this standard come from? Did Moses deliver this to you? Like, where's this? How is this going to affect the market forces if you give me these discounts? So incidentally, I'm not making this up. They said, you need to go talk to Larry. I'm like, Larry who? So I talked to this guy, Larry Clark. He's like, yeah, we probably need to change it. But anyway, this is your county, and you can see the same situation when you zoom into the property. Here's your Pompano City Center, by the way, and different properties. But you can see how your smaller parcels along the roadways are way more potent than the bigger parcels behind them. So your assessor has the same bias baked into their model in the county. So just be aware of that. Ask questions. Talk to your assessor about it. Your average dirt value in your northwest is about $270,000 an acre, and over on the east, it's pulling about $1.5 million an acre for the dirt value as a vacant parcel per acre. So from a productivity standpoint, just comparing La Veranda against the Pompano City Center, if we were to say apples to apples, how much of the thing on the right would it take to equal the value of the thing on the left? So here they are. Here's their values. Here's their footprint. So you basically need that many of La Veranda to equal all of that. Or another way of thinking about it is that if you filled that one part of the parking lot with La Veranda, it would equal the entire value. So bear in mind, we didn't do this when we built our cities 20, 40, 50 years ago. We just allowed developers to do what they want, and they gave you what you have. So now you have to think differently about your city. Think of it this way. Your job is to put furniture in your house, or put carpet down in your house, but the furniture's already there. It's going to be a little bit more complicated than if your predecessors had thought this way about your city and your land use. So that's the habits of most cities and how they've built. Growing forward, your old town, this is your current site of your old town. Its current value is $1.2 million. Its current value per acre is about $600,000. So there it is on the map. And this is going to be changing once this goes in with its future projection value. So basically, I don't know if you can see it on the map down there. That's what it is today. And when this building is built and put on the tax rolls, here's how it's going to shoot up. So you want to do more things to build around that and build that capacity around it and take advantage of this investment. But that's a pretty big jump from 1.2 million to 56 million of value. So you see that spike pop up. So yeah, that's cool. That's really good that you're doing that. That's very potent. This is going to growth projections. We had Miami's data. One of the cities that a cousin you could learn from is Doral, which is in the west of Miami. They're on the other side of the airport. They have a lot of disadvantages. They don't have a coast. They're very far west, but they're really entrepreneurial as far as what they're doing in their Deco district. So I would say use them as a comp. They're doing a lot of townhouses and things to thicken up around their commercial core. They're pulling about 1.7 million per acre. Also look at Wynwood is another interesting example where in Miami where they had a whole bunch of warehouses and they did something different out of them. They're pulling 7.8 million in Wynwood. So this is off the coast. It doesn't have the advantages. Use those as comps. There they are. But again, more importantly is maybe look at your cousin of Hollywood. So focusing on Hollywood, one of the things that you can see is where their downtown is. It's nowhere near the ocean. And you're getting a little purple mountain there and a nice red spine. And it's evolving. They're getting peaking out at 40 million an acre, or sorry, 50 million an acre and 58 million an acre in and around their downtown core. But they also have that walkability and that downtown design that's intentionally designed as an urban center. So they have a street you can cross without taking your life in your own hands, like what you have here. And I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, like working in West Palm Beach, the biggest challenge that we had was Okeechobee Boulevard. Anything we did on either side of Okeechobee Boulevard was gonna have this scar through the middle that was gonna be difficult to walk across. And we weren't able to achieve a positive walkability there. Times have changed with FDOT. I think you can probably be in better shape here with Atlantic. But here's some examples of what's going on Main Street in Hollywood. 7 million, 13 million an acre for that little two-story building on the right. These are all pulling 9 to 14 million. So you see that third story kicks it up a notch to 14 million. So looking at some of putting you all side by side from a stat standpoint, you're about the same population. They're 152, you're 112, let's say. You're both equidistant to your shared grandparent of Fort Lauderdale. So you can have those examples. So could you take your downtown and put them side by side as a way of going forward? Into this phase of eliminating blight, you know, y'all have to have an honest conversation about the word blight and the intentions behind that. In this day and age, we need to move past that as a protocol and just be honest with what you're dealing with that. This is what you have versus your cousin. These are all the parcels where the dirt is worth more than the building on top of it. And then, so you're looking at, you have about 56% of your boundary area there is in, the dirt is worth more than the building. They're at 37, but when you remove the circle, let's just keep the circle in. 16% of their land is owned by their CRA, where you're looking at 35% of the parcels. So these are your parcels I would prioritize and talk about. But also let's go back to the blight for a second. We were doing a project in Kansas City, Missouri, and they asked us to do an analysis of redlining. I don't know if you all know redlining. Redlining happened in 1934. It was a policy created by our federal government in which we changed mortgages from 7 years to 30 years. So before that, you couldn't get a mortgage beyond 7 years. The federal government said to all communities across the country, you have to draw a map locally to have these 4 colors. The 4 colors were green is good, blue is desirable, yellow is declining, and red is hazardous. So you wake up one day and you had this map drawn in your community. Hazardous was 2 primarily forms of population. It was either your infiltration of immigrants, and the 2 major classes of immigrants that were coming into the country that decade were, number 1, were Italians, so watch out. That could bring your value down. Number 2 were Germans. Well, guess which kind of Germans were showing up in 1930? Those are the Jewish folks. But then the third was black populations. So when they asked us to analyze redlining, I mean, you can see it on the map. They're like, could you look at it? And I'm like, yeah, we could tell it's happening right there. When you cross this one street, so that's their version of Atlantic Boulevard right there, it goes from orange, which is 2 million an acre, and crosses a street and it drops down to yellow, which is 600,000 an acre. So from 1934 to 1968, when this was deemed illegal, families that lived in those districts could not sell their houses in the traditional marketplace because they could not be secured a mortgage. They couldn't get a home equity line to fix their house. So you see this legacy effect. Even though we stopped doing this 50 years ago, there's Troost Avenue. I drew a red line on the map. East of Troost is heavily redlined. What a surprise. So the result is a loss of property. You see these are all just the vacant parcels. You see the high correlation of vacancy in the red line neighborhoods. So in Kansas City, Kansas, if you take all the houses and squeeze them together, it's 3 square miles. If you take all that properties and squeeze them together on the Missouri side, it's 7 square miles, which is the land area size of Gladstone, Missouri right there, which is 20,000 people. So you all have to pay for the road, the garbage truck to go by, the police officers to go by. In their case, the snowplow that goes by. Yet you're not getting any taxes out of it because there's no house there. You've got the building value and the dirt value. Dirt's not worth that much. The building's where all the value is. So when you tapestry the red line map onto their community, you see this haircut that every district takes today, from the green line to the blue lines to the yellow lines to the red lines. Now, incidentally, you can also see where they plowed the highway through the red line neighborhoods because after 3 generations of successive extraction of wealth, that was also the cheap real estate. And in Miami, they did this through the Liberty City and Overtown neighborhoods with I-95. So in Kansas, this is the average value of a vacant lot. There are 732 vacant lots in this neighborhood. This is the Quindaro neighborhood. John Brown's father had a university here. The average value of a vacant lot is $400. So that means the property is paying $40 in taxes. If you put a house on it, it's not much better at $17,000, but let's be fair, $17,000 is 40 times more than 40, or 400, right? So the recipe here is to take it from a declining position. You want to get some buildings in there to start paying taxes to level it off. And just to put a point on it, we went back to the red line data and pulled the old values of the houses. They were valued about $3,000 back then, and just said, let's just say you didn't adopt redlining and folks just paid their taxes. We put all of their properties back on their map and ran the numbers, and basically if these folks just stayed in their houses, paid their taxes, and they were allowed to live like every other neighborhood, you would have $30 million more taxes. Or another way of putting it, and this is something I told their community, I said, look, your great-grandparents followed racist policy, period. Every community did that followed the mortgage system in their city, and they effectively paid $30 million for doing that in their community. So they have to turn that around. In their case, it's going to take 18 houses to take it from a declining position to a level position. So in that neighborhood, that's what's necessary. So can you go into the neighborhood and could you help a business person start filling those houses? Now in the mortgage industry, they're not going to support this because the house is going to cost $200,000 to build and the taxable value is $17,000. So is there things that you can do within your powers? In their case, could you take out a bond? For y'all, we tried to find your redlining map, but we did find this. You were too small to have a redline map, but you have the residual effect of the rime. This is a 1972 map of Broward County, and there's your district labeled right there as a blighted district. So whatever banking policies you had in place, they were probably following similar banking practices that were going on in Miami without the evidence of a redline map. But the evidence of removing wealth from a neighborhood definitely happened here. This is a map of population. White folks are like beige, black folks are yellow, and you see inside the neighborhood, it's heavily, predominantly a black neighborhood still today. So acknowledge the fact that that history happened. It's an uncomfortable history, but it's a truth of what happened in this neighborhood, and find out ways to remove some of the restrictions that are in that neighborhood, be it zoning, make the zoning easier to do infill. For folks, I don't know what kind of title issues you have with properties in that neighborhood, but they definitely suffered the disinvestment through our system. So moving forward in the economic health, that may be the neighborhood, you still have to build a core. Hollywood is a good example of transferring that over and what you could build if you replicated Hollywood here. Current value is about $1.6 billion. If you dropped the Hollywood Boulevard spine in there, you'd be at $2.2 billion, so that's a pretty big jump in value. It could be a good model. Let me kind of skip ahead. I know that I'm getting over time here. So you'd be going from a 1 to less than 1 and a 1 to less than 0.7. When you drop Hollywood in, that takes you to a 1 to 5. Still under a 1 to 6, but a heck of a lot closer than you currently are. So that might be your model to shoot for. Think of it as, I know that I need to lose 20 pounds. I have a goal, so I'm going to do what I can to get there. And that's also by only affecting, 4% of your total land area inside the district. So a big hit in a small area. And you may have a different strategy as you go into other parts of the district. Think of ways, you have different problem sets, basically. Finally, encouraging private investment in public land. So just to close, productivity responds to how we build. That building on the left is way more productive than the building on the right. Comes with other issues, parking issues, things like that. So think of the balance with that. Thicken up, you're already paying for it. You already have all of the infrastructure out there. Don't even think about thickening up inside your CRA district, but also think about what's west of I-95 as well as a community that's consumed a lot of real estate in your community. The opportunity is ripe. You already have land that's within your portfolio of non-taxable land that's in your control. And then back to this, you could look at this as a deficit to your cousin down in Hollywood. I see it as an asset. You have a lot more land under your control to start moving forward with, so that's good. But make sure that you're intentional about how you grow up your spine going forward. And then look to your siblings. Don't look just south. You can look up north to West Palm Beach, and City Place is a great example, or some of the projects that came in after City Place. But how you thicken up and where you go from here, have that model of your grandparent going forward. And keep doing what you're doing. You have some great projects in, go for it. So that's kind of where I'll leave it, with one final point. What we find with a lot of the ways that governments are set up is that we have a paradigm of how we used to operate, that we continue going forward, but we have current technologies that are moving forward. Obviously, you see our use of technology with GIS maps and all sorts of craziness. Ask bigger questions. You're in a better place than what your predecessors are, and you have better tools. So use those going forward. And thanks for letting us do some math.